Hi, I'm BJ, and this is the Arcane Alienist Podcast. Hello out there, everybody. Thanks for listening. So today I've got a recap of my Friday night session, and woo, it's a doozy. A lot happened, so it was an interesting session. So I'm going to go through that, and then we'll take some calls from the usual suspects. Okay, so I'm going to have to look at my actual notes to change on the session recap just to make sure I get everything, because a lot happened. So here we go. We picked up where they left off last time. The last session had ended. They had fought through some goblins and hobgoblins, and two hobgoblins had fled and slammed the door behind them. They rushed into the room where the hobgoblins had fled. It was empty, and they found they were in a room full of a lot of discarded armor and weapons that had apparently been taken from the various merchant caravans and foresters that the goblinoids had either captured or killed. Most of these things are iron, steel-based things, so the goblinoids can't use them because they can't really stand the touch of iron. And they also pretty quickly locate a secret passage that the hobgoblins used to escape. It's pretty obvious that must have what happened because the hobgoblins aren't in the room. So they look around a little bit, and they had found the secret passage. So that's where we had left off last time. There's a dwarf size suit of plate mail, so Dolly the dwarf notices that, puts it on so that she upgrades her armor a little bit and is ready to go. So they go down the secret passage, and they've got these kobolds that have been helping them, bringing up the rear again. At the end of the passage, they find another concealed door pretty easily. So the two of the frontline guys, Harold and Roderick, kick the door open. Everybody else gets ready. They kick the door open. There's a room full of hobgoblins that are already alert. So the hobgoblins crowd in the doorway, start forming up ranks. The party does the same thing, at least those that engage in melee, which are basically our warriors and clerics. Harold the fighter gets mortally wounded, but one of the clerics is able to get off a healing spell without just being disrupted. And we did decide to go back and work strictly with the OSE sequence of combat this time. And it was a little clunky with everybody kind of getting used to doing it that way, but I think we started to get it down the further we went in. So spell disruption is a potential problem, depending on who wins initiative. Anyway, but Hadamar, the cleric, is able to get off a healing spell and revive Harold and get him back in the fight. We get a few exchanges in melee. And they kill a couple of hobgoblins, and the others start to lose their morale and flee. And I will make a note that I did misapply the rules for retreating, and we didn't really sort out what I was doing wrong until after the session. So I made a note to fix that in the future, because what would happen is the monsters would fail a morale check and then run on their turn, and they shouldn't have been able to run so easily. You can't just run out of melee after failing a morale check. You've got to stay there, and then the next round before initiative, you have to declare a retreat, monster or PC. So that probably drew out some of the fights more than they would have, or they may have gotten more people to surrender. Anyway, so there are two doors in the north end of the room that the hobgoblins that did run away went through. And these doors are kind of set at 90-degree angles to one another. And so Roderick, the paladin, he spreads some lamp oil on the floor in front of them, and then they just kind of go to the edge of the pool of oil and wait for the hobgoblins to respond. The kobolds finally crowd up in with the PCs so they can help out, because they sense that they're kind of on the verge of defeating these hobgoblins who've pressed them into service. So one of the door opens, and there's 4 hobgoblins in there with bows. They shoot off a volley of arrows and kill 2 of the kobolds, but they don't hit any of the party members. There's 5 kobolds, 2 of them die. The other 2 of the other 3 fail their morale checks and flee. We're going back home. The party returns fire, wounds the hobgoblins, but don't kill them. And interestingly enough, one of them gets dropped with a shot from a pistol. Remember, we do have black powder weapons, and he goes down, but the next round he just kind of picks himself up like he's okay. When should have been pretty clear that was a death. The shot should have killed him. So, what's that about? Well, nobody's going to find out because, well, listen to the rest of the story here. Anyway, the second door opens, and there's two more hobgoblins. So both groups of hobgoblins now crowd out of their doors and start kind of merge into one group, but they're standing right on top of the oil. So Hadamar, one of the clerics, ignites the oil and does enough damage that it kills all 6 of these hobgoblins that are still there. But 3 more hobgoblins appear in the doorway, one of the doorways. There's 2 archers, and there's a spellcaster behind him that starts chanting an incantation. So Celestina, the party's magic user, she starts to cast to do sleep. She's been holding on to that spell like for 3 sessions now. No one to waste it. Wait till the right moment. Hadamar uses a sling to take down one of the archers, and that opens up a shot for Durgosh, the orc, to fire his pistol. Hits the spellcaster, doesn't kill her, but does disrupt her spell. Celestina's spell goes off, and there's 2 hobgoblins left, not dead, and they fall asleep. The kobold rushes into the room where they are and coup de grace them, the last remaining kobold, whose name is Hegel. The party advances on to the next room, and they find there's only 2 hobgoblins left. One of them is the war band captain for the goblinoids. His name is Bith. So he surrenders, and they persuade him to lead the party back safely outside, although they're not sure they trust him because, the whole time they've encountered goblins and hobgoblins has been nothing but doublespeak and let's make a deal. And, well, Harold's not having any of this. He's tired of listening to the yank his chain. So they're just, he insists they just kind of shut him up and march him out. But they do tell him to explain what's going on here. So this hobgoblin war captain explains once again the goblinoids are effectively mercenaries. They've been deployed there by the Troll King. He's their archfey patron. The will of the Troll King is communicated to the goblinoids through their seer, which is the spellcaster they killed. We didn't go into a lot of detail of that. In fact, I don't think a lot of people caught me. There was a lot of talk and back talk, and everybody was kind of confused and felt kind of pressured to be in a hurry. So some of these facts may have gone overlooked, and I don't know. Some of them I may have thought I said and I didn't. Anyway, but the seer is the connection to the Troll King. That kind of divines the will and the instructions for the tribe. So it's not like they go meet the Troll King face to face and he issues marching orders. Anyway, the goblinoids were told to run humans, dwarves, and the like out of the area, put the kobolds to service mining sulfur, and also put anybody else they captured and could put into service into helping with that and with burning charcoal. He also mentions the kobolds gather guano from another cave in the area. And so it's pretty clear now they're gathering charcoal, guano, and sulfur, that they are manufacturing gunpowder. And sure enough, they're going down the side passage. Here's another hobgoblin standing guard to the entrance of a side chamber, and on the wall behind the hobgoblin is depicted an image of a fire with a big X through it, like no fire. So they're taking this hobgoblin into custody, and they hear a goblin yelling from in the room, whoever's out there, douse your torches. It turns out this is the booyog of the goblin group, their sorcerer. He comes around to investigate. Actually, he sneaks around the corner, and he manages to get off a magic missile spell before Bith, the hobgoblin captain, tells him to stand down. So they take the booyog into custody as well. So now they've got 3 hobgoblins and a goblin. Farther down the passage, they get back into the goblin area of the cave complex. So they've left the hobgoblins behind. Of course, they've killed all the hobgoblins at this point, or taken them prisoner. they ask Bith how many goblins are in here. He says, well, I mean, it depends on how many you killed. They kind of do some figuring. He says, there's probably about 20 or so. They encounter another group of 4 goblins, immediately get them to surrender. And so they've got this big number, ever-growing number of prisoners, so they decide to take out the ropes and put them together chain gang style. So they're kind of bound at the ankle, so they can't move fast, but they're bound to each other. So he is, it's indicated that everybody needs to surrender. So Bith says, okay. So he starts yelling down the hallways, calling to the goblins. He says, tell them to surrender, and he's yelling, Bree Yark, Bree Yark. And he says this is sort of the goblin call to surrender, although I don't think anybody really believes that's what he's doing. So they get around the corner, and Durgosh, because he's an orc and he can see better in the dark, he spots a group of goblins. They're laying in wait with bows. And so he points it out so the goblins don't get off an ambush. And so Bith again orders them to surrender, but there's this mocking laughter. So this goblin comes out. He's a little burlier, bigger than the others. He's the boss goblin, Eoz. So he's the highest ranking goblin. And even though he's not the leader of the war band, that's Bith, this hobgoblin. And Eoz finds it pretty amusing. She finds it pretty amusing. Bith got himself captured and is kind of teasing him about it. But when Harold the fighter demands that the goblins surrender, she agrees and motions for one of the goblins. One at a time, we're going to go forward and let you inspect us and put us in line with the other prisoners. So the first goblin drops its bow and moves forward. But it's obvious a ruse. While everybody kind of focuses on this goblin, at least that was the plan. It didn't work. The other goblins go ahead and draw and shoot. And unfortunately, Durgosh, the orc of the party, he's gets killed. He's wounded, and they've expended all their healing resources, spells, and potions. So they've lost another party member at this point. The goblins close in for melee. Bith starts trying to get himself free, as do the goblins in the back. They're tied up. So the 3 retainers that are kind of near the back of the group surround Bith and start working, fighting with him till he finally surrenders again. Roderick and the kobold Hagel that's still with him start, goblins and hobgoblins that are trying to get away and undo their bonds. They start just coup de grace them. And Dolly, Harold, and Adamar move up with the goblins and close and kill some, force others to break their morale and start to run away. So in a last decision to save himself, Bith, the hobgoblin, reveals that they have some human prisoners that he hasn't told them about, and he'll show the way to them. So he takes them to one final chamber, which is pretty deep in the complex. There's 2 hobgoblins in there who immediately surrender. They've got some human captives, a couple who are merchants, along with 2 of their guards that were captured on the road. And then there's a forester who's in a cage. He tells them he's been in a cage because he's mouthy. He's been there longer than the other 2 because he's obnoxious and mouthy with the hobgoblins. He's been treated more roughly and locked in a cage instead of just manacled to the wall. There's also a gnoll in another cage that's just growling and spitting and screaming. Just sort of mad with rage. Hadamar is a cleric. I allowed him to roll a knowledge check, and he got a 1 in 6, which is the best you can do when you do those kind of checks in OSE. So I said you would know as a cleric that gnolls are basically mutated animals possessed by a demonic spirit. You kill the gnoll, the demon spirit goes back to where it came from. You could try to communicate with it, but this one seems particularly agitated and worked up, so it may not want to. You can give it a try, but instead Harold just executes it with point blank with his guns, which nobody really worries about. But then Harold turns on the hobgoblins. So there'd been some disagreements prior to this part about what to do with the prisoners, but now it gets more heated. Harold wants to execute the hobgoblins for their crimes because they're enemies. The clerics have already, prior to this, but now particularly step in and say, they've surrendered, they're not being aggressive, they're defenseless at this point. killing him is kind of cross a line that we can't really stand for. Harold is viewing this as a military operation. And he said, we were perfectly fine killing them indiscriminately earlier, even when they were unarmed. So everybody's disagreeing. Harold at one point actually threatens to shoot Roderick if he didn't get out of his way. So Celestina, the magic user, suggests that they let the kobold decide their fates, since out of all of them present right now, his probably have the biggest grievance against the goblin faction. So everyone kind of settles down and agrees to this, and Hagel, without much hesitation, condemns him to death, but he asks Harold to do the deed, so Harold shoots the hobgoblins in the head one by one, and then he just kind of storms off angry away from the other people and I'm heading back to town, count out my share of the gold and give it to me when you get it sorted. And that's where we left off. So a little tension there between the characters at the end, but they have more or less routed the goblins and hobgoblins. The bugbears remain. One of the things that Bith did reveal to them was that they don't, even though they're kind of making the gunpowder there, the bugbears come and pick it up and take it somewhere else. So also absent is the kobold's queen is not there anywhere. And he says you need to talk to the orcs. These orcs that have been actually the ones raiding the along the tradeway, and they just kind of again indicates we kind of swap prisoners and people change hands quite a bit. So I don't know what became of the Kobold Queen. You should talk to them. And of course he's compelled to tell all this, because they've got him, at their mercy, and he's trying to get himself and what remains of his band extracted from the situation. But in the end, like I said, the party's not having any of it. So there are no remaining goblins. The handful of goblins have fled. Well, I guess there were some hobgoblins that previously had made a pact to take the young and leave the forest and not come back. So yeah, there may be a few random goblins that ran away during the last couple of sessions that might be out in the woods, but I think the bugbears are kind of the only faction left among the goblins to deal with. But they've still got to deal with the orcs potentially, and then maybe they have some other questions, some things they want to figure out back in town as they go to regroup. I don't know. We'll see about all that stuff next time. Anyway, that was quite a long recap, but like I said, quite a bit happened. It was a pretty exciting, and we'll play again in a couple of weeks. So now we will move on to the next segment. All right, let's take some calls here. We've got, first we'll have a call from Jason of the Nerds RPG Variety Cast, followed by Karl Rodriguez of the GMologist Presents. Then we've got Joe Richter of Hindsightless, and finally Daniel Norton from the Bandit's Keep. So we're going to start with Jason. Here we go.
Hey BJ, Jason here. Great episode. Glad you enjoyed Dungeon Crawl Classics. I hate that I missed that game, due to work complications, but I definitely look forward to joining the next session. As far as your upcoming reviews, I guess I need to hurry up and watch the Green Knight movie, huh? It's available streaming. I'll try to watch it this weekend. And as far as the debate on tributes and all, I don't think I have anything else to say. I think it's all interesting points, and if it continues on your show, great. If not, I think your contributions are excellent, and they added to the discussion. So I'm looking forward to your session recap next episode, and I hope you and yours are doing well. Take care.
Thanks, Jason. No rush to watch the movie. I am going to probably do a spoiler-free review when I review the game, and maybe a short review, spoiler-free review of the movie. And then hopefully for a follow-up to that, I can get my friend to join me and talk more in depth about the plot of the movie and comparing it to the source material and things like that. So thanks for the call, and I'll talk to you later.
I really enjoy listening to other players' recaps because then it gives me ideas. I really haven't formed every single idea, but I like some of the things that you potentially proposed or what you were thinking when I was describing the scene, it's kind of cool. And now that I have this sort of strange astronomy in the Fomalhaut system to work with, there are so many possibilities. And maybe you just inspired me to think about things in a different way. So thanks, BJ, for playing and for the recap. Again, hearing the player's perspective is kind of cool because, like, what are you guys thinking? I love, like, for example, the Deadlands. I thought the big adversary was going to be a giant burrowing Gila monster, but it was not. It was a big demon.
Thank you, Karl. I had a great time playing, and yeah, it's always cool to hear what your players perceive is going on because they may have some ideas you never thought of that you want to run with. Or you may notice that you thought they understood something that they misunderstood, and gives you a chance to go back and find a way to clarify it. But either way, yeah, it's always cool to hear everybody's perspective on what just happened. So glad you enjoyed my recap, and I'm looking forward to playing again here, I guess, this coming weekend by the time this episode hits the air. So take care. Talk to you later.
Hey, BJ, awesome recap on your DCC session. That sounds super fun. That's a game I've never played, and it's those weird dice that always kept me away. But now with the internet being what it is, and dice rollers and Roll20 and all that stuff, so can you talk a little bit about that? How was the dice rolling? How were all those funny little dice? How they do? And yeah, man, I do apologize for your podcast becoming adjacent to controversy and drama. It's never good to become adjacent to that stuff, but sometimes it just happens. It's like there's a force out there who's just constantly stirring the pot. But I don't know. I'll do my best to not let your podcast become adjacent to controversy anymore, man. Have a good one. Peace out.
Joe, do I detect a little bit of wordplay in your enunciation there? I don't know what force could be out there stirring the pot on things. It's a mystery we may never solve in our lifetime. No, I didn't mind I wasn't drug into that controversy. I just happened to offhand mention one of yours. So enough said about that. No, we had a good discussion, but amongst, I guess, the four of us across 4 different podcasts about min-maxing and character generation and where you put your stats and all that stuff. Nah, it was a great time. On the funny dice for Dungeon Crawl Classic, so just to clarify for you and anybody else listening, so you got your standard dice that you'll find in Dungeons & Dragons, but they've got some additional ones that you have to order special from Goodman Games, and they look funny compared to some of the dice that we normally use in D&D. But that's a 3-sided die, 5-sided, a 7-sided, a 14-sided, a 16-sided, a 24, and a 30. So there will be specific kind of places in the rules, which I did not encounter in my first outing with Dungeon Crawl Classics, where it'll say the rules will instruct the player to use an improved dice, and so you bump it up. So if you're supposed to roll a D12, it'll now be a D14. You get to use one of those funny dice. If you normally be rolling a D6, that means you bump it up to a D7. Other times you may be told to reduce the die. So say you're supposed to roll a D6 and it says reduce it, now you're doing a D5. And so you always go through this chain. So it's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 20, 24, 30. And there's a die for each of those denominations. Where it comes up most often, at least from what it seems to me, it is, and this is where Dungeon Crawl Classics does share some things with 3rd edition D&D, which means would also with 1st edition Pathfinder, where you have action dice. That this replaces your base attack bonus. And you know how in 3 whatever versions of D&D, once your attack bonus hits a certain point, you then add a second attack and you get to make 2 attacks, but the new attack is with a lower bonus. And then once that bonus climbs to a certain point, you get your 3rd attack. Well, that's what's happening here, except instead of getting a bonus, you're getting an action die. So your base action die is 1d20, and then you add whatever ability modifiers are relevant. But instead of getting a second D20 roll with a bonus like you would in 3rd edition D&D, when you get to a certain point, you add your first action is resolved with the roll of a D20, and your next action is resolved with the roll of a D14. So rather than having a lesser bonus, you just got a smaller die that makes you less likely to roll really high. I mean, you still apply your ability bonus to it, but there's no class-based bonus. I take that back. There are class-based attack bonuses, but they don't apply separately. It's not going to downgrade your bonus on your second action. You've got the same bonus you have for that level. It's just first applied to a D20, and then when you get to the point of having a second action, it's a D14. And the next level, that second action is a D16. Then it goes up to a D20. And then not every class gets this, but a handful of them at 10th level, which you only go up to 10th. You only go up to 10th level in DCC. You'll be at the first action is a D20, second a D20, and the third one a D14. So the pattern repeats itself. You've also, whenever you do something and have a critical roll a crit, each class has a table that you roll on. For example, I was playing a cleric, so my crit table was table number 3. And you start off rolling a D8 on that table. The table has more entries than 8, but you only roll a D8. But then every couple levels that die increases. So first and second level it's a D8, third and fourth level D10, fifth and sixth level D12, seventh and eighth level D14, ninth and 10th level D16. Well, we started at 5th level, so I've still only got one action at a D20, and my crit table is I'm rolling a D12 on the crit table. So I've got to go up another level before I get that D14 second action, and then at 6th level. And then at 7th level, I'll also get the D14 on the crit table. So, and you can look at the free starter rules on Dungeon Crawl Classics that you can get online and see these, but that's where those funky dice come in. And it just so happens, because I'm playing a cleric, at a 5th level, I'm not quite yet at a level where any of those come in as part of my standard repertoire of actions. Now, we may encounter, if I cast a spell or some other effect that says upgrade or downgrade a die, then I might have to roll one of those. But I'm going to have to level up at least once before any of the funky ones come into play. I don't think they're that hard to wrap your head around. They make a lot of intuitive sense if you're familiar with, particularly familiar with 3rd edition D&D. Even if you're not, they make a lot of sense once you see them in play. So some of the other characters got to roll their second. I think they're more warrior types did get to roll their two action die. One at a D20 and one at a D14, but I didn't get to. So hopefully I'll level up at some point in the near future and get to experience that. I actually think I like it. In fact, I've thought, even though before I got into Dungeon Crawl Classics, just when I was kind of looking at the system, are there ways to incorporate some of their dice even into my D&D games, just because it makes things a little... it's always fun to roll different kinds of dice. Players like rolling dice. I think that's... I've heard that time and time again from the professional game designers at Wizards of the Coast and Paizo and places like that, is when they really start talking to players, doing market research, talking to people who love it, and they think about, what do we change, what do we stay the same? People love rolling their dice. And so sometimes, not everybody, so a handful of times people say, why don't we make that a static, or let's roll fewer dice, but you can go too far on that, because I think people really do enjoy rolling the dice, and the more funny kinds of dice and the more ways to incorporate dice into the game, I think that's part of the fun for a lot of people. Anyway, thanks for the call, Joe, and I'll talk to you later.
Hey, BJ, Daniel from Bandit's Keep. Awesome recap of the Dungeon Crawl Classics game. I'm glad you're getting to try it out, especially as a cleric. Seems like it was super fun, and I look forward to hearing more about it. Hey, BJ, calling in again. Actually, you're making a really good point about, or to point that out, I should say, that you can raise your stats. Because that could actually be a really fun way, I guess if you knew the character was going to live, or you hope they did, to start with a character, let's say, that had more like average stats, and then allow the stats to grow with them. So, your character starts with kind of an average-ish strength, and then, every time they get that stat increase, they keep putting it in strength, because kind of to go back to what Joe's talking about, it's like they're training, right? They're getting better at being a fighter, so they're going to want to work on their strength. They realize they need it. So that's a super interesting way to consider growing a character. I don't know if it happens fast enough in 5e to make it super relevant, but you could maybe tweak that, so maybe they get stat increases every level, and maybe they start with a lower amount of point buy. It could be an interesting way to play.
Yeah, Daniel. Yep. I'm no longer I'm no longer a foreigner to the world of Dungeon Crawl Classics. So, and as I've pointed out with all the other calls and in my last episode, I really did enjoy it and looking forward to playing again. Yeah, you could do that with 5th edition. There's always the trade-off of in 5th edition even, do you take a feat in lieu of a ability score increase? And of course, I think if people wind up with exceptionally high stats at first level, they're going to go more the feat route, which doesn't necessarily make them more powerful, but it certainly makes them more versatile, oftentimes in ways that it's hard for dungeon masters to track, from a lot of the discussion I've heard from 5th edition dungeon masters. So it's not an increase in raw power, but it does give them options that, if you're not careful and don't think about it, the net effect may be that they're more powerful and that they're more difficult to challenge, because they've just got a broader set of abilities. And then there are a handful of things that just do blatantly make you more powerful. But some people don't play with feats. That's an optional rule. My preference for 5th edition is not to start you off super weak, but also to not start you off with, I kind of like the way they do with the standard array and point buy, where nobody starts with a score over 15 unless it's for their ability score increases associated with their race. I kind of like that approach, just so that you have to make a meaningful choice about sacrificing an ability score boost to get a feat. And there's that sort of strategy, and how does that pay off? Also, I think, as time has proven with 5th edition, you're probably better going with the feats, because you don't have to have ungodly stats to continue to be successful later on in the game. I mean, you should boost them up a little bit, but it's, sometimes the feats are more worth it. Anyway, thanks for the call, and I really appreciate it. I'll talk to you later. Okay, well, that's it. Once again, I want to thank my callers. Daniel Norton from Bandit's Keep, Joe Richter from Hindsightless, Karl Rodriguez from the GMologist Presents, and Jason Connerly of Nerds RPG Variety Cast. Be sure and check out their podcasts, also all streaming here on Anchor. Until next time, everybody take care of yourselves, and I'll be back with another show at some point. And that's it for this episode of The Arcane Alienist. I want to thank Dave Bone for the cover art that I use for the episodes. Check out ironseer.com. And the music is Come and Get It by Scott Holmes Music. Thank you for listening. Give me a call sometime through the Anchor app or at the Anchor website. And I'll be back in the future with another episode.